Jessica Carter sat in her wheelchair outside the chic downtown café, the cold November wind tugging at her tailored coat. Her life had always been fast-paced, dominated by board meetings, mergers, and power lunches, but her accident had changed everything. Once a vibrant, adventurous woman, she now measured every movement, every step, through the lens of her limited mobility. Her friends had insisted on this blind date, saying it might lift her spirits, but Jessica had long stopped believing in surprises or joy. She watched people pass by, bustling with energy she could no longer take for granted, and sighed quietly, hoping the date wouldn't be a total disaster. Inside the cafe, the smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with cinnamon and pastries, a comforting contrast to the biting chill outside. Jessica adjusted the cushions in her wheelchair, trying to look composed. Despite the anxiety curling in her stomach, her mind wandered to the awkwardness of blind dates, strangers sharing intimate spaces, pretending to be charming. The thought of forced small talk made her shiver, yet she reminded herself that she had nothing to lose. After months of monotony and frustration, maybe a stranger's presence could be a tiny spark. Maybe, just maybe, it could make her feel alive again. Mike Reynolds didn't know much about Jessica Carter when he agreed to meet her. A mechanic in his late 20s, living paycheck to paycheck in Brooklyn, his life revolved around greasy engines and stubborn car parts. He wasn't used to cafes filled with businessmen, let alone meeting a woman of wealth and influence. Yet, there was something compelling about the idea of a blind date that felt unpredictable, a brief escape from the monotony of repairing brakes and oil changes. When he walked through the cafe doors, his worn boots scuffed against the polished floor, he carried an air of genuine humility and nervous anticipation, unaware of how life-altering this meeting might be. Their eyes met across the room, Jessica scrutinizing him carefully, noting the smudges on his hands and the casual, slightly disheveled look. Mike noticed her wheelchair, the subtle tension in her posture, and the poised yet weary expression that hinted at a life marked by challenge. Despite their differences, there was a moment of recognition. Two people who had endured hardships, each in their own way. He smiled awkwardly, and she nodded, unsure whether to expect charm or awkwardness. The waitress led him to her table, and Mike's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and self-consciousness. He knew he wasn't rich, suave, or polished, but he wanted to make this interaction genuine. As they exchanged greetings, Mike stumbled through polite conversation, asking about her day and her work, aware of the stark contrast between his world and hers. Jessica responded cautiously, her voice calm, measured, but with an underlying warmth that caught him off guard. Their dialogue slowly shifted from superficial questions to stories of resilience, of dreams deferred and struggles faced. Jessica spoke about her accident with a quiet strength, revealing her frustrations and loneliness. Mike shared tales of long nights in the garage, the satisfaction of fixing broken machines, and the pride in small accomplishments. Slowly, walls began to crumble on both sides, replaced by a tentative curiosity and mutual respect. Mike's honesty seemed to intrigue Jessica, a rare occurrence in a life surrounded by people who saw only her wealth and status. She was used to flattery and pretense, not someone who could speak candidly about his life without judgment. His eyes sparkled with sincerity, and his awkward charm made her laugh, a genuine laugh that startled even herself. The cafe noise faded around them, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of unplanned connection. For the first time in months, Jessica allowed herself to relax, to feel the warmth of human interaction. Without expectation or pressure, it was uncomfortable yet thrilling. The conversation shifted to dreams and aspirations, and Mike admitted he sometimes felt trapped in a life of limitations. Jessica, in turn, revealed her longing for independence, for moments of spontaneity she hadn't experienced since the accident. Mike nodded knowingly, empathizing without pity, a quality that left Jessica feeling seen for the first time in a long while. She realized that his world, though materially modest, had a richness she had long forgotten, a richness of effort, determination, and authenticity. It was a perspective she hadn't expected to encounter over coffee, let alone in a stranger's company, and it stirred something deep inside her. By the end of their meeting, neither wanted to leave, and both sensed that this encounter was unusual, meaningful. Jessica felt a spark she hadn't felt in years, a tiny flicker of hope that happiness could still exist in unexpected forms. Mike, meanwhile, was captivated by her resilience, her intellect, and the quiet strength that radiated from her despite her physical limitations. They parted with a sense of anticipation rather than closure, aware that this meeting was just the beginning. Outside the café, the city lights twinkled, and for the first time in a long while, Jessica felt a cautious optimism warming her heart. As Jessica wheeled herself home, she reflected on the encounter, realizing that life could surprise her even now. The contrast between her polished world and Mike's humble reality didn't matter. What mattered was authenticity, effort, and the connection of two souls meeting in unexpected circumstances. She wondered what would happen next, feeling a mix of curiosity and hope. Little did she know, this blind date, initially dreaded, would set the stage for something extraordinary, a story that would challenge her perceptions and ultimately transform both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. After that initial meeting, Jessica couldn't stop thinking about Mike. His honesty, his warmth, and the spark of genuine curiosity he carried with him stayed in her mind long after the cafe lights faded behind her. Something about his humble demeanor, so different from the polished, calculated people in her corporate world, made her feel a long-forgotten sense of ease. The laughter they had shared echoed in her mind, as if the city around her had softened just for that moment. She found herself wanting to know more, to see the world through his eyes, even if only for a fleeting encounter. The next afternoon, she found herself back in Brooklyn, wheeling through the narrow streets toward Mike's small garage. She wasn't sure why she agreed. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps gratitude. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, its brick walls streaked with grease and time. Inside, the smell of oil and metal hit her, and the clutter of tools and half-finished machines made the space feel alive. Mike greeted her with a shy smile, wiping his hands on a rag, his grease-stained fingers evidence of countless repairs. She couldn't help but notice his dedication. Every detail of his garage spoke of hard work and determination. Mike immediately began showing her around, pointing out various projects. A custom wheelchair attachment, a small motorized lift, and intricate modifications he had designed for people with mobility challenges. Jessica watched, fascinated, as he explained the mechanics in simple, passionate terms, his hands moving over metal as if he were conducting a symphony. She had never seen such ingenuity and care directed toward helping others, and the realization struck her. This man, so unassuming, had the ability to create miracles from scraps. Slowly, a sense of admiration replaced her skepticism. He was someone who didn't just fix machines, he improved lives. Curiosity turned into cautious hope as Jessica allowed Mike to examine her wheelchair. He inspected the wheels, the frame, and the worn cushions with meticulous care. She felt a strange mix of nervousness and trust, realizing she had never given anyone this level of access to her vulnerability. Mike worked silently at first, his brow furrowed, then muttering softly to himself about adjustments and improvements. Jessica watched his hands, moving with skill and precision, transforming her worn wheelchair into a vehicle that seemed almost alive. With Each turn of his wrench, she felt a little lighter, a little freer. She hadn't realized how much she missed the feeling of mobility without struggle. Mike's determination was infectious. He spoke little, letting his work demonstrate his care, yet the sincerity radiating from him was impossible to ignore. Jessica noticed small touches, a cushion repositioned for comfort, the handle adjusted for smoother grip, the wheels aligned to perfection. Every adjustment showed thoughtfulness, patience, and a deep empathy she hadn't expected. The garage, chaotic as it was, became a space of transformation. Mike wasn't just repairing her wheelchair, he was restoring her independence, bit by bit. Jessica's heart swelled with gratitude and a cautious excitement. For the first time since her accident, she felt the possibility of movement without limitation. As the afternoon sun slanted through the garage windows, Mike paused to wipe his hands and look at her. "Try it now," he said simply. Jessica wheeled forward, testing the adjustments. The movement was smooth, effortless even, a stark contrast to the jerky, cumbersome mobility she had grown used to. She laughed, a pure, unguarded sound spinning slowly around the garage. Mike watched her, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. It wasn't wealth or influence that mattered here, it was compassion, skill, and heart. In that small garage, two worlds collided, and something remarkable was quietly unfolding. They spent hours together that day, discussing dreams, disappointments, and the unexpected paths life had forced them onto. Mike shared stories of customers whose cars he had saved, and Jessica recounted moments of corporate triumph and personal struggle. The contrast of their lives made the conversation rich and compelling. Jessica realized that her world, despite its luxury, had often been isolating, while Mike's world, though modest, was vibrant with authenticity. By the time the sun dipped below the city skyline, an invisible bond had formed, a connection based on shared humanity rather than status, a rare and precious link neither had anticipated. As Jessica prepared to leave, she felt a wave of gratitude and warmth. Mike had not only repaired her wheelchair, but had rekindled a spark of hope and independence. She hesitated at the garage door, realizing how unusual it was for someone to care so deeply without expectation. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling the words carry more weight than usual. Mike nodded, modest as ever, and simply said, "I just wanted to help." That simplicity, that honesty, struck her profoundly. She realized that this blind date, initially dreaded, had evolved into a life-changing encounter, one that challenged her assumptions about happiness, resilience, and human connection. On her way home, Jessica reflected on the day's events. She marveled at the idea that someone so ordinary in appearance could have such an extraordinary impact. Mike's hands had restored more than her wheelchair. They had restored a sense of possibility. Her mind, usually dominated by schedules and strategies, was now filled with thoughts of creativity, kindness, and courage. She felt lighter, more hopeful, and unexpectedly excited about the days to come. She didn't know where this connection would lead, but she sensed that her life had already shifted. What began as a blind date had become the first chapter in a story neither of them could have imagined. Over the following week, Jessica found herself returning to Mike's garage more often than she had expected. What had started as curiosity and gratitude was slowly transforming into something deeper. She watched him work with his usual quiet determination, repairing tools, tinkering with old engines and testing modifications. Each time he greeted her with the same modest smile, his eyes lighting up with genuine warmth. Jessica couldn't remember the last time someone had made her feel so comfortable, so understood. It was as if the walls she had built around herself were melting, brick by brick, under the gentle influence of his presence. One afternoon, Mike revealed a new project he had been quietly working on. He had designed a fully customized wheelchair for her, incorporating advanced modifications to improve comfort, mobility, and independence. Jessica's eyes widened as she examined it, marveling at the intricate details and thoughtful touches. Every adjustment seemed to anticipate her needs, from the smooth rolling wheels to the ergonomic seat design. She felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, awe, and disbelief. Mike's skill and care had turned what she thought was an ordinary machine into a symbol of possibility. She realized he had not only fixed her wheelchair, but had also restored a part of her spirit she had thought was lost forever. Mike guided her through the first few movements in the new wheelchair. The difference was astonishing. Every turn, every shift in weight felt fluid and natural. Jessica laughed, a sound full of joy, spinning slowly as if she were rediscovering her freedom. It was more than just mobility, it was empowerment. Mike's eyes followed her every move, pride shining through despite his usual modesty. She felt a connection so profound it was difficult to articulate. Someone from an entirely different world had given her the chance to reclaim something fundamental, something she had missed since her accident. Her heart felt lighter, more open, and surprisingly hopeful. Their bond deepened with each passing day. They shared meals, coffee, and long conversations, often forgetting the world outside the garage. Jessica spoke candidly about the pressures of running a multinational corporation, the loneliness of wealth, and her dreams beyond the constraints of her physical limitations. Mike shared stories of struggle and triumph in his modest life, the satisfaction of fixing broken machines, and the joy of helping people in tangible ways. The contrast between their worlds only enriched their connection, revealing that true value lay not in money or status, but in authenticity, compassion, and effort. Both felt a rare sense of belonging they had never experienced before. Jessica's friends began noticing a change in her demeanor. Her smile, once rare and fleeting, now appeared regularly. She carried herself with a newfound lightness and confidence, fueled by a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. At company events, she spoke with warmth and presence, surprising colleagues who had grown accustomed to her guarded, business-focused persona. They whispered about the shift, curious about the source of this transformation. Little did they know, it was a humble mechanic, miles away from Wall Street, whose skill, patience, and heart had reignited the spark of life within her. One crisp morning, Mike surprised her with an invitation. He had installed a small motorized attachment to her wheelchair, allowing her to glide smoothly over streets and pavements with minimal effort. Jessica felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude and emotion as she tested it. She could move freely and independently, something she hadn't experienced in years. Mike's modesty and care had given her more than a machine. They had given her confidence, mobility, and hope. In that moment, she realized that happiness often arrived in the most unexpected forms, sometimes carried on the hands of someone whose world seemed far removed from hers. As weeks turned into months, their relationship evolved naturally, a blend of friendship, admiration, and unspoken affection. Jessica often found herself drawn to Mike's honesty, his humor, and the simplicity of his intentions. He, in turn, was captivated by her resilience, intelligence, and the warmth she radiated when she felt safe to be herself. Their worlds, once so distinct, had begun to intertwine. The blind date that had initially seemed like a minor inconvenience now felt like destiny, a carefully orchestrated meeting of two lives that were meant to influence and transform each other in ways neither could have predicted. Eventually, Jessica invited Mike to a corporate gala, a dazzling event filled with her usual elite circle. He arrived in his simple clothes, yet carried himself with quiet confidence. While many whispered and stared, she stood proudly beside him, recognizing that their bond was rooted not in appearances or status, but in shared respect and affection. As the evening progressed, it became clear to everyone that the connection between them was genuine, unshakable, and inspiring. The once paralyzed CEO was smiling freely, her presence radiant, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, skill, and human connection. Months later, as they watched the New York skyline from her office terrace, Jessica reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them together. A blind date that had seemed trivial had evolved into a life-changing encounter filled with trust, care, and the rekindling of hope. Mike's humble hands had restored more than a wheelchair. They had restored her spirit. In turn, she had opened his eyes to a world beyond survival, to possibilities that wealth and status couldn't buy. Together, they had proven that sometimes miracles arrive in the most unexpected forms, and happiness often appears in lives intertwined against all odds.